welcome. World Engineering Day for Sustainable Development does two things. It celebrates engineers and engineering, as well as talking about the engineers' critical role in taking us all to a sustainable future. So can I ask you each to introduce yourselves, please?
Well, I'm Stephen, and thank you, Susan, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here on this Sustainability Day. My background is chemical engineering, and I'm probably quite unique in New Zealand because in my career here, I worked on what we say both sides of the meter. I've worked both in the process industries, in working with most industrial customers in New Zealand, and I have worked within the electricity industry. So I understand how our renewable electricity industry works, and my work at the moment is helping more young engineers understand the future in going to zero emissions.
Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, same from my side. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk on this day, which is really important to just expose the world to what engineers do and what they are going to be doing to create this world that we're moving into, that will have to be more sustainable, right? Mm-hmm. I'm also a chemical engineer by background, but I've moved more into the engineering management space through my career. At this time, I'm heading up the Sustainable Energy Systems group at Victoria University of Wellington. And obviously being in academia, our job is to create or to develop the engineering capacity that we will need in the future in developing this economy and the transition that we need towards the low carbon economy.
Thank you. So you both talked about some of the challenges that we face in moving to a low carbon emissions economy. Do you want to each talk a little bit about what you're seeing the top 2 or 3 challenges in that space, and then potentially what we're going to do to overcome them?
Well, my first challenge is I have seen over the decades engineering capability reduced in this country, in Australia and all around the world. And sadly, these are the engineering skills that we're going to need to build our zero economy future. And in saying that, we have to take the few engineers that are left down the path, and they're going to have to work differently than they worked in the past, because we can no longer work in our own disciplines. We have to think as system engineers. So I can no longer work as a chemical engineer. I have to take knowledge and work with all the other disciplines, and I have to work in the social sciences, because we have to understand behaviour and we have to understand where society wants to go in heading towards zero carbon emissions.
So what's that mean for our training of
That
engineers?
means we have to be much wider. We can no longer train engineers in the disciplines that they were trained at in the past.
Too narrow?
They're far too narrow. They still need the basic engineering skills, but we all have to, I think, understand that we need to understand the whole of energy systems now, not just our own individual disciplines, because it's all interconnected. The energy system is very complex, and you cannot change one thing somewhere else, expect to change carbon emissions, keep costs reasonable and maintain grid security all at the same time. It's a very complex system engineering challenge.
So Alan?
I can't agree more. It's what's now called a transdisciplinarity approach. So we can't work in our own silos anymore. Transdisciplinarity means that we're working with society to understand problems and develop solutions with. So it's not that we are developing a solution for, it's with. So this whole transdisciplinarity and how to teach that to the engineers, but getting exposure to outside of the engineering discipline is really vital. And it's really understanding that we're dealing with complex systems. And as Steve said, interrelated. Things like the concepts that there are now really manifested in the last few years, things like water, energy, food nexus. We can't even go and look at energy alone without thinking about what's happening with water, without understanding what's happening with food, and understanding how all of these interplay. So it's a challenge for us in the academia. There's only so much time.
Yes, that's right. You've got. That's right.
So I agree that our job is to get the fundamentals of engineering there. But for the engineer going into the profession, there's also understanding there's a continuous learning that needs to occur, and really actively engaging with other disciplines.
Can I add to that and this continuous learning? Because I have been involved with the University of Waikato here in New Zealand in taking engineers into new learning, and we've been running these process integration workshops. We've run 3 now in the last 8 months. 60 people have attended all 3, and I was in Sydney this week after the ravaging bushfires, because engineers in Australia now want to do something about the solution in going to zero carbon emissions. And we even had one engineer that came all the way from Vancouver to attend our 2-day workshop, and then he went back to Vancouver. That is how interest is now starting to happen globally in the way we're trying to think. And we kicked this workshop off all about system engineering.
That's really interesting, because my next question was going to be, how open do you think the engineering community is to either adding on in the continuous learning more broadly, or as new engineers to start to think about this from the outset?
Well, I think if I look at, so I'm also a committee member of the Sustainability Society, which is one of the technical interest groups of Engineering New Zealand, and we run sustainable development workshops and forums, and we're getting increasing interest in that, and recognition that from engineers that they need to understand the space a lot better going forward in their careers. So
and if I can add, we should look at what's going on in the UK, because the UK are 10 years into their climate change legislation, and what has encouraged the new thinking in system thinking has been IET, the old Institution of Electrical Engineers. And they have, over the last 5 years, kept talking about smart grid. They've done all the smart grid architecture work, and that's now leading to the policymakers understanding in Whitehall that system thinking and system engineering is the way of the future.
So professional bodies have quite a strong part to play. And
they have a very important part to play. But the sad part is, a lot of this work is done by engineers on a pro bono basis. And all the good work done around the world, beyond zero emissions in Melbourne, the work of IET, the work of iChemie is done on a pro bono basis, and it puts to shame some of the professional work being done elsewhere.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, adding to that, I think there are critical questions we need to ask ourselves as engineering professionals and Engineering New Zealand as a body, in terms of what do we need to do in terms of improving practices and informing policy around changing the way we do things in our society and our economy.
If you had to give our members and other members of professional organisations some concrete suggestions in terms of what they want to do, what would your top 2 or 3 tips be for them? If they think, right, I want to do this, but I'm stuck. I do not know how to properly engage in this conversation, but I want to.
I think they have to have courage. They have to have courage to engage, and they have to be practical and do things. I have set up from scratch a zero emission house, and I've done this through my transport, through all the good things that you do, trying to learn, because you can't help other people if you can't do it yourself.
And just to recognise that there are opportunities and forums that are focused on this, and again, it's just getting up and engaging with like-minded people that are out there.
I think as an engineering community, we have forgotten the role of demonstration and using that to teach people.
Mm-hmm.
We used to run workshops in New Zealand. We used to train technicians, we used to train engineers, and we used to have institutes in our different industries, in meat, dairy, pulp and paper, that would train engineers. We sadly don't have these institutions.
Thank you. That's quite sobering, is what I'm hearing from them.
Well, that's the reality, Susan. You can't, if we to tackle a problem,
we have to understand it.
You have to understand it.
We have to first have the awareness of it.
Yeah, you have to be aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you both give us some examples of some really effective work that's actually happening in the sustainable development space, where engineers are doing things differently?
To just being in the energy space, one of the key things that we think about in this transition to a low carbon economy is also the resilience of communities. And what we see now in New Zealand is to move away from the centralized and being dependent on a centralized system, to become more independent and resilient. So we see engineers actively going out and developing things like microgrids. Mm-hmm. They are connected to the grid, but they're focusing on communities, what communities need. And we're using things like artificial intelligence and those kind of buzzwords at the moment to optimally design those kind of systems and make them more cost effective. We see engineers, we haven't talked about what are the main priorities for our country, but things like transportation is one of the key. I mean, that's 30% of our emissions, right? So we're going to see this transition to electric vehicles as an example, and for that you need a lot of infrastructure development to take place. So, I mean, engineers will obviously play a key role. Well, I believe without engineers we won't reach any of these goals that our government and our society sets itself.
There are pockets around the country of industrial sites that are doing some wonderful stuff now with roadmaps to get to zero carbon emissions, so they've started on their journey. Mm-hmm. And manufacturers are realising, and we do have some smart manufacturers in New Zealand that are heading in the right direction. In terms of transport, we've started our electric vehicle program and we have a good charging network rolled out, but it's not going fast enough. And we still fail to do it for public transport. Public transport's the key thing. And I was astounded when I read that listener article and how few electric buses there are in this country. Yeah. And we still have swimming pools in the North Island using natural gas to heat water to 28 degrees centigrade. I'm dumbfounded. And we took the heat pumps out 20 years ago. It's just dumb.
Well, I mean, that's one of the key challenges that we have is, we pride ourselves that we're a country that's light regulated, but clearly to get this transition, we're going to need deliberate intervention and strong leadership from our public sector, because we can't just leave it to the market. And people need assistance in terms of how to change their behaviours.
So what I'm hearing is that this is a systems issue. We need engineers and communities to engage with each other.
And we need engineers working together.
And your suggestion is we need a bit more heavy regulation to create the incentives and the structures to actually get people to change the way they do things and their behaviour. So it's quite a complex matrix, isn't it?
That is the challenge.
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
But engineering is at the core of it, because we're not going to build our zero emissions economy without good and more engineers. And that's the bottom line.
It's the bottom line. So it's the pipeline. It's keeping all our New Zealanders in engineering and not and encouraging them to be inspired and excited by engineering, and then to bring all their skills and disciplines to bear. Yeah.
And then I think we will get there.
Well, that's a good, hopeful note to end. What have you not said that you would like to encourage us to think about?
The solutions are there. Engineers are working on the solutions. I think technology and innovation is available. We just need, as we've said now, the right mix. They talk about triple helix, right? So we need public, private and academia to effectively work together to make that happen. I don't think we're going to crash down and burn going forward. I think all the opportunities are there for us to create this low carbon future that we all see.
I'm optimistic. I think I think we have enough experienced engineers to lead this country forward in this next critical 10 years, because this is the decade where we do have to put together the structure that we need for the future. It's too late if we leave it until 2030.
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you, and thank you both for finishing on such an optimistic note and for participating in this conversation on this really important day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.